I love this. What I was thinking is you unleashed your personal genius within, and that you were really training leaders out of leaders. And that's such a powerful skill set and desire, because you're right. Some people don't want to train people to be leaders because then they know exactly, oh, you'll leave. But what if you just had a constant flow of that? And what an incredible, really amazing story. Yeah, it says a lot about your heart.
Well, one of the things, Dr. A, that I did is I shared with the group of inspectors that I had to train. I said, my goal is to train you, and I want all of you to do much better than me. Mm-hmm. And I said, if by chance you all rise and create a vacuum, you'll pull me up with you. And
yeah,
it works.
That's great. I mean, it's such a win-win mentality, right? Instead of divisiveness and separation and keeping people down so that you stay on top, it's like, oh, let's create a whole bunch of win-wins together.
And where we are with our youth, there's not enough of us coaches or adults to be able to reach them.
Yeah.
So we have to have a model that we train leaders to help them develop other leaders, because, and that's why I like working with the millennials, because they're in a position to reach up and down. They can pull somebody up as they're being mentored to also. And I believe that that's a model that we need to implement on a more wide scale than we do now.
Yeah. Before we get into emotional intelligence, and I want to hear your take on what that means, I'm curious for you. I would imagine that after 31 years of substance use, quitting is challenging. Would you be willing to share a little bit how you did that? What happened for you there?
Well, I became a person, at the same time, I became a person of faith. And I had been my own God for 45 years. I thought I had it all going. And, I had a failed relationship where a wife had left me. And I was one of those that thought no woman in the world could possibly leave me, not me. Maybe anybody else, but not me. So I was broken. So when I said my coping, I learned how to cope all over. The drugs, alcohol, these were how I coped. And now I was at a point where I had promised that if, I prayed and promised that if I stopped drinking and smoking and doing the things that I did, that I would never touch it again. And I'm happy to say I've got 20 years of sobriety, but it wasn't an easy thing. I had to really learn how to cope. I had feelings and emotions that I had never knew about, that I had been medicating all these years. I'm riding down the street and some little drop started rolling down my cheeks, and I almost, tears, me? Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it, but it's reality. And one of the things is that too many of us don't want to talk about. When I work with the youth today, I share the things that I'm most embarrassed about. Not my successes. I share the things that I'm ashamed of. And that transparency helps me bond with them in a way that, I'm not trying to act like I got it all together. I'm still a work in progress. It's going to take me time. I'm working daily on it. But this is part of the thing. But they see too much hypocrisy everywhere. People act like they've got it all together. And the reality is we're all a mess. I ask people, how many of you are from dysfunctional families? When everybody should be raising their hands, one or two may say, well, we got some issues. No, we all have issues. That's the reality.
Yeah. So true. And you're so right. It's such a gift, especially with younger people, to open the door for them to share those dark, scary, shameful places, because it's such a toxic problem when you got to hold on to that and you can't share it with anyone because you don't see any models sharing their messiness with you. So many people are putting on masks and performances that it's hard to know what's real.
And, one thing that really, really spoke out to me is, like I said, my pastor had introduced me to John and took me through his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. But one day I was in there and I gave a testimony and I talked about my failed marriage, about me losing a fortune, about my drug and alcohol use. And I got out afterwards. I told him at one point, my pride would have kept me from sharing that in front of a packed church. But I don't care what any of you think about me. It's what my Creator thinks about me. Well, after that, I got out to the vestibule area and a girl came to me, 12 years old. And she just grabbed me and started hugging me and said, thank you, Mr. Cunningham, thank you. And I'm looking at the ceiling like, what in the world did I say that can cause this? And she's crying like crazy and squeezing me tighter and tighter. I'm glad she was only 12 because she might have taken all the air out of me. So I says, what is it? I asked her, what is it? And she looked at me and she said, there's hope. I said, what do you mean? She says, my daddy's an alcoholic, and if you could be healed, he could be healed. I started crying after that. And
wow.
I had to ask myself, would I be willing to embarrass myself in front of 1 million people just to have one young child react like she did? Of course. Because what other people think about us isn't important. But what that young child did, giving her some hope, all the difference in the world. So that's when I realized the value of true transparency.
Yeah.
That was another one of those defining moments in my life and my journey.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, my eyes filled up with tears, and you're so right. It's those moments when you don't even know that of course you're there doing this, whatever, I'm sure you had like a packaged speech a little bit, but it's like, you don't know who you're going to affect and how and why. Right. And everybody needs to hear those human stories of struggle and messiness, because we are all that way. I think it's so fascinating how we can have the perception that no one else is struggling. And then one of the greatest gifts, like one of the things I love most about group coaching, is that people realize like, oh, it's not just me that's struggling with this. It's like, oh, they struggle with it. They struggle with it. They struggle with it. And then it releases that feeling of I'm alone and isolated. And I think it's so powerful. So thank you. I love that. And that hope piece, right? If we are living in a place of a lack of hope, it makes everything seem pretty grim, but there is so much hope. I think that's how I see the world.
We're in the same boat there.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let's talk emotional intelligence. What does emotional intelligence mean to you first? Let's come up with your definition of what that means.
Emotional intelligence is something that can't be described easily because it affects everything we do. How we think, how we interact with people, how we handle adversity, how we process information. It just affects everything. Our feelings and emotions are everything. We all have them, but most of us had very little training in learning how to manage them. As I shared with you, I had no training. And when I had insecurities when I was 14 years old, and somebody handed me a joint or a bottle of wine or beer, that was how I dealt with my emotions, the things that I wasn't happy about in my life. I tried that. Did you ever, some people ask me if I ever wondered about my parents and ever felt bad about why I moved around so much. No, because they weren't the problem, I was the problem. And learning how to manage my feelings and emotions was something that didn't come until many, many decades later.
To listen to the full episode, head on over to nfacoaching.com, hit the podcast link, and it'll take you to all of the full episodes. And go ahead and leave some comments. I'd love to hear from you to know how these inspirational interviews, tips, and tools are impacting you in your life and business. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on any of the Max Potential Habits episodes.